السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. أما بعد, respected brothers and sisters listening at home, the month of Ramadan is fast approaching. We said last week that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grants great blessings during the month of Ramadan. It is the leader of all months. There is no month in which a person can expect forgiveness, mercy, deliverance from hellfire, entry into paradise, increase of awareness and taqwa and piety. And all of these are great gifts from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They are eternal gifts, meaning if you are given any one of them, then that is going to be a blessing that you will carry out throughout this life and throughout the next. What this month requires of us, or rather what Allah requires of us in this month, is sacrifice. In all of the other forms of worship, we are expected to do certain actions, certain rituals, recite certain things, give certain things, so on and so forth. Here we are abstaining, because the commandments of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are what? To do and to refrain from, right? You have the halal or the permissible. These are the things to do in your life whilst you stay within limits. And then you have the haram, the things to refrain from. And so the fast of the month of Ramadan strengthens the will of a person, of the believer, not a person, the believer, because it is required that you do it with an intention to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it strengthens the belief of a person and the will of a person in order to abstain from everything that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has commanded the believer to abstain from. This is why we are asked to stay away from food, drink and sexual activity from dawn until dusk. This is where from dawn until dusk, because whenever Allah Azza wa Jal asks you to stay from something, He gives you a permissible alternative. Right? Riba is not permissible, but trading is. Alcohol is not permissible, but other beverages are. Pork is not permissible, but other meat is. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not make something, zina is not permissible, but in marriage one can fulfill their desire. Allah Azza wa Jal has placed necessities in the human being, and then He made certain laws, and He said, fulfill your necessities in this manner and do not do so in this manner. So abstaining and then creating limitations. So from Fajr until Maghrib, between Maghrib and Fajr, eat, drink, fulfill your desire, as long as it is in a halal and permissible way. However, when the adhan of Fajr comes in and the beginning of the fast comes in, you are to refrain from eating, drinking and sexual relations until Maghrib time. And so we have much to gain. Actually, we have everything to gain, because the one who finds Allah finds everything, and the one who misses or loses the opportunity to connect with Allah, they have lost everything. So we have everything to gain, and Allah Azza wa Jal has absolutely nothing to gain other than being pleased with us. Allah says in the Quran that Allah wishes to be pleased with His servants. He does not wish to punish and take His servants to task. But Allah does not gain anything. No increase in His power, His majesty, in His being. We don't add anything to what He owns through our worship. And so it requires, we said, some commitment from ourselves and some sacrifice. You have to realize that it has to hurt for it to be beneficial. You have to feel like you're giving up something. And you have to fight with your inner self and your nafs and your desires. If you are not fighting with your desires, then it is very unlikely going to be a successful month of Ramadan. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, وَأَمَّا مَنْ خَافَ مَقَامَ رَبِّهِ وَنَهَى النَّفْسَ عَنِ الْهَوَى فَإِنَّ الْجَنَّةَ هِيَ الْمَأْوَى. The one that deprives his lower self his human self from what it desires out of fear and awareness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then that person will enter paradise. And so naturally, your nafs is like a child, a very young child that does not understand. If you say to your nafs, do you believe in Allah? The nafs will say, yes, I believe. You ask your nafs, do you want to go paradise? It says, yes, absolutely, I want to go to paradise. You ask your nafs, do you want to go to hellfire? It will say, absolutely not, I do not want to go to hellfire. But then you ask your nafs to obey the command of Allah, it says, it's a little bit difficult, it's not what I like. You ask your nafs to abstain from what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made prohibited, that is going to lead to the punishment of Allah. It objects by saying, but I like it. That's the mentality of a child. No matter how much you explain to them and they agree with you, they have a tendency to go according to their feelings, whatever they feel in the moment. And so this is our nafs. Whatever it feels. Today it feels like doing something, it will, if you don't give it what it feels, what it wants, you don't give your nafs what it wants, you're going to be thinking about it until God knows how long. Until that desire is fulfilled. It doesn't allow you to think about anything else. I want that. Just like the nagging of a very young child that is fixated on one thing. If you fulfill its desire, then you want something else. So this is the month where we learn to tame our nafs. And once we tame our nafs, once the desires, earthly, material desires of a human being are controlled, then that human being can be raised above the level of angels in proximity to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay, so the fast of Ramadan is a great blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is an obligation that we have to fulfill. What are the rulings? Simple rulings. When you look at the books of fiqh and jurisprudence, Salah has number of chapters, Zakat likewise, Hajj a number of chapters, and extensive information. When it comes to the fast of Ramadan, it's actually one of the easiest acts of worship to do in theory. One of the most difficult ones in practical. Because although Salah is similar to fasting, you can't talk, you can't drink, you can't eat, you can't think of anything else, your body, mind, heart, everything has to be concentrated. But Salah is 5 minutes. Okay, if you lengthen your Salah, it's 10 minutes. The fast is 12 hours, 14 hours, 16 hours, 18 hours. We had previous fasts in the month of Ramadan. And so maintaining the commandments of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala throughout that time is somewhat difficult. So what are the rulings? The fast is an obligation on a Muslim. If we get our non-Muslim friends, neighbors, colleagues, acquaintances to fast, good for them. They are only reaping the physical benefit, maybe the mental benefit, but nothing more than that. For the fast to be an act of worship, a person has to be a believer, number one. Number two, they have to be an adult. Although we train our children to fast so that they do not find it difficult at the time, but every obligation is prescribed once a person reaches the age of puberty. And then a person has to be sane. They have to be able to understand the timings of Fajr and Maghrib, and that we are to refrain from eating and drinking, so on and so forth. And then for women, that they are not in a state that prevents them from fasting, a major state of impurity. Okay. Once Ramadan is announced, the announcement of Ramadan happens usually after Salatul Maghrib of the last day of Sha'ban. Maghrib, and then the announcement is made. That is the beginning of Ramadan. The first obligation is to make an intention, and the intention happens the night before the fast. The time of intention is from Maghrib all the way until Fajr. You do not have to, the formula that we are taught, Nawaitu, Siyama, Ghadin, so on and so forth, different formulas, that I intend to fast tomorrow for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as an obligation of the month of Ramadan. It's not required to state the intention, but in your mind and in your heart, from Maghrib all the way until Fajr, that is a time where you intend to fast. So intention is extremely important, because without the intention it is not fulfilling the act of obligation. 1. Number 2, to refrain from eating, drinking and marital relations. Okay. From dawn until dusk, from the time of Fajr all the way until Maghrib. Out of that, in that time, if a person was to eat or drink or engage in sexual activity or relations, forgetting that it is Ramadan, the moment they realize, they stop eating, drinking, whatever it is, they stop and they continue with the fast of that day. Usually this may happen on the first day of Ramadan, that a person forgets that they are fasting. Or first day, second day, it can happen. Then breaking the fast at the time of Maghrib, and actually it is a sunnah to break the fast early, right? And not to wait until, let's say for example, I'm at work or I'm traveling or so on and so forth. I should have something to break my fast with, because it is a sunnah. Okay, so breaking the fast at the time of Maghrib is as soon as Maghrib time enters, and not extending it, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not want to cause hardship for the believer. He says, as we said last week, يُرِيدُ اللَّهُ بِكُمُ الْيُسْرَ. So Allah knows our limitations. Do not extend before Maghrib. Who is exempt from fasting? A woman in her monthly cycle. Exemption, she cannot fast, as she cannot pray. But during that time, she can make dhikr, she can make dua, she can listen to motivational lectures, she can read religious texts, so on and so forth. Other actions, because the gates of paradise are still open. The gates of the hellfire are still closed, even for her. Also exempt is a woman that is in postnatal bleeding. That woman will not fast. Total exemption. Then you have a woman that is pregnant. For this woman, she has the option of fasting or not. So she has to gauge for herself whether she is able to. And there is no harm in making the intention, beginning to fast the first day or the first few days, and seeing how it goes. And there is nothing wrong with fasting one day and eating one day. This is for the sisters, if they are pregnant or they are breastfeeding. Like sometimes, although they are exempted, they don't have to fast, but they feel they want to be part of the fasting, because the entire family is fasting, and it feels a little awkward, and it is obviously a habit. And so there is no harm, because the exemption here is not like the exemption of somebody that is on their monthly cycle. A woman that is on her month, she is not permitted to fast. The pregnant and the breastfeeding woman is permitted to fast, and is recommended to fast if she has the physical ability and the days are short and there is no extreme heat, so on and so forth. But if she does not, then she will eat during the days of Ramadan and will make up those fasts after the month of Ramadan and after her condition. For example, if she is breastfeeding after having completed that. Also exempt from the fast of Ramadan is a person who has a physical sickness. Now, physical sickness is not a headache, okay, or a cough. Right? It has to be something that if a person fasts, there will be hardship, extreme pain. There is fear that the sickness will become worse, or there is fear that recovery is going to be delayed, or there is fear of death or loss of a limb and so on and so forth. This is what fuqaha explain. So this is physical ability, right? If a person is not physically able to fast, for example, they are taking lifelong medication, heart condition, they have to take medication certain times of the day, then they should eat. Sometimes you have this idea, okay, I'll just take the medication and I will not eat and drink. But Allah does not need your not eating and drinking. He has exempted you. You have an exemption. And so Allah wants you to take that, because He says, I don't want to overburden you. And then you are not fulfilling the conditions of the fast. Okay. Likewise, and this is a difficult one. Also exempt is people who are of old age, as fasting is detrimental to their health. It weakens them further. They are already in a state of weakness, and it weakens them further. Right? And sometimes they can be stubborn, our parents, grandparents, no, I have to fast, and so on and so forth. And so we explain to them gently that Allah does not need your starving. Allah does not need it. Allah does not need your hardship. You have done it throughout your life. Allah will grant you that reward. Because a person who is accustomed to a certain act of worship, when a time comes they can't fulfill that worship, Allah grants them that reward. So they have to have the confidence that you eat and drink for your health, to maintain your health, which is also a command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, by the way. Right? He says, وَلَا تُلْقُوا بِأَيْدِيكُمْ إِلَى التَّهْلُكَةِ. So we are not permitted to harm ourselves. The healthy person is not harming himself by refraining from food and drink. We are actually benefiting our physical bodies. But the person who has a condition, the person who is of old age, need to be given that confidence and reassured that you are going to receive the reward, and you can benefit from the month of Ramadan by reciting Quran, offering salah, making dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, giving sadaqah, and the giving of your fidya in some cases when a person cannot fast even after the month of Ramadan. It is a lifelong condition. Then the paying of fidya is going to get you the reward, inshallah azza wa jalla. Then also exempt from fasting is the traveler. Again, this is an exemption similar to the pregnant and the nursing woman, that if a person is able to fast, then they should do so. And Allah actually says, وَأَن تَصُومُوا خَيْرٌ لَكُمْ. It is better for you to fast, because fasting outside of Ramadan does not have the same effect on iman and taqwa and spirituality. Same effect on the body, perhaps, but not on the spirituality. Because outside of Ramadan, the gates of paradise are not open, the gates of hellfire are not closed, shayateen are not chained up. So a person who is traveling should fast if they can do so without hardship. But they can break their fast if the journey is too long, difficult, it's going to cause hardship, so on and so forth. Even if there is no hardship, if they choose that they want to, break the fast, they are entitled to that. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given permission, and that person is exempt. A note about traveling. First of all, the person traveling has to be doing a travel that is that exceeds what applies to salah, which is approximately 48 to 50 miles. Okay, so this is one way. Okay, 48 to 50 miles, one way. This is number one. Number two is that the person who is traveling, whilst they are at home, they need to begin fasting, because right now you are not traveling. You have a flight at 8 a.m. You're going to Hong Kong, for example. You are not traveling now. Fajr is 5:35. For you, you are expected to fast. And you start the day fasting. When you get to the airport, you don't have a cappuccino. You maintain your fast until such time that it becomes difficult. Then you are allowed to break your fast. Okay, so you cannot wake up in the morning and have breakfast and say, well, I'm traveling. No. When you become a traveler, when you are actually on your way, you have left your town and you are on your way traveling, that's the point where the exemption begins. Okay, so in that time, you can only break your fast, because you are already fasting. You can only break your fast if it becomes difficult for you. And it's only for you to gauge that. Nobody's going to come and say, it's not hard enough, what are you doing? It's up to you. But if the journey is a hard journey, it is a longer journey, and so on and so forth, then it is permissible. But only once the journey begins. Okay. As for the person who is traveling between Maghrib and Isha, they can intend that I will not fast tomorrow because I am traveling. And then the duration, whatever duration you apply, without going into details, whatever duration you apply to shorten your prayers, or in some instances combine your prayers, that will apply to the fast of the month of Ramadan. Right? So in the Maliki madhab, for example, it is 4 days. So you can be a traveler for 4 days. If you are staying in a place, in a town, in a city, less than 4 days, then you are not considered a muqim. You are considered a traveler. Anything more than that, you should, whilst you are commuting there or traveling, getting yourself there, you are a traveler. Once you arrive, you have your hotel, you are in your cousin's house, and you are going to stay for a week, then you are no longer a traveler. Okay. In the Hanafi madhab, it's 2 weeks, I think 15 days. In the Shafi'i, it is a month, or maybe in the Hanbali has no limit, depending on whatever is considered traveling. So you have to apply whatever you apply to your salah. You can't apply one for salah and one for Ramadan. Okay, for Ramadan I'm going to take the month, for salah I'm going to take the 4 days. Doesn't work that way. So this is the last person that is exempt. A note on mental health conditions. A person that has mental health condition, whatever the condition is, if they are able to differentiate between what is good, what is bad, what is an obligation, what is permissible, what is haram, prohibited, they know the times, this is the time of Fajr, this is the time of Maghrib, this is the time of Isha, then they are expected to fast unless they are taking medication which they cannot stop. If we can alter the times of medication, then we should do that and we should fast. So things like depression, anxiety, a person that gets panic attacks, things of these sorts, they are mental health conditions, but they are not severe from the point of Sharia that they are going to exempt you from fasting. When we talk about insanity, it's a person that does not differentiate between what is good for me, what is harmful for me. Like a child, can't tell the difference between the hours of the day, the times of prayer, does not understand obligation, does not, and usually you know that if a person is not able to take care of their physical hygiene, they can't take care of their nourishing themselves unless they are told to eat and drink, or else they would go without days on end. This is the person that is exempt from fasting. So it is insanity and not just a mental health condition, although if a person has a mental health condition and they require medication and the timings cannot be altered, then they are also exempt from fasting. So this is the obligational worship of fasting. Make intention, take your suhoor, it is sunnah to take suhoor. Rasulullah said there is barakah in it. Stop your suhoor when Fajr time begins. Okay, you can stop ideally 5-10 minutes before, that's good. But on the dot, on the minute, Fajr 5:15, stop at 5:15. Okay. And then Maghrib time, it is sunnah to break the fast as early as possible. Have something light, come to the masjid, pray your Maghrib salah, go home, eat your iftar. Don't start with the main meal because your belly is asleep. So the sunnah of Rasulullah is a form of mercy. Throughout the day, there's been no food, so it has to be awakened. The system has to be awakened. So what you do that, you do by having some fruit, a sip of water, some dates, so on, whatever you like. The sunnah is to take dates, but whatever you can, but something very light. Give it 5-10 minutes whilst you pray, and then engage in the full meal, inshallah azza wa jal. We'll talk about other spiritual gains, inshallah, of the month of Ramadan next week, bi'idhnillah ta'ala. We ask Allah azza wa jal to allow us to live to see this blessed month and to make the most out of it. When adhan is made, can we ask all brothers, inshallah, to stand up and make the rows, fill in the gaps so that we can get the maximum of people in the building. Assalamu alaikum.